Hi, this is Eric at Frog Valley Tropical Fruit Farm, and this is Florida Natural Farming. Today I'm going to talk all about Theobroma Cacao, cocoa. We dry farm it, and it's possible here in basically 9B, 10A border in Florida. And I'm standing right now in front of this grafted jackfruit tree, and it's a tiny little tree. And it only has, or not only, it has like 20 fruit on it that it's set. And it just blows me away that without watering, it just is like, can produce so much fruit. This little tiny tree. And I know it's from the fact that I put 2 piles of my daily manure, which is this stuff. So I clean out my barn. It's just grass hay with a little bit of urine in it from the barn, because I lock my zebus in at night so the coyotes don't get them. I use it for bedding, but they also eat a little bit of it. And then it has about 20 pounds of zebu manure. It's my vegetable garden that I never finished. And then the armadillos got in. You can see they're still getting in it, and they just destroyed it when I planted it. But it doesn't get watered, and it's never been watered. And there's quite a bit of stuff in here. I need to really get on it and do a better job with it, because I could get some vegetables out of it, and I need to like finish this area and over there, and then replant this and replant that over there. But hey, I'm just not into growing vegetables. It's too labor intensive for me. If I had like 5 people that were working here with me, I could have a nice demonstration garden of dry farming vegetables, but it's just me, myself, and I. And until my partner retires, and soonish, it's gonna be me, myself, and I. So yeah, it'd be nice to have a big demonstration garden, vegetable garden, just to show people what is possible in Florida, because it doesn't seem like anybody from the higher education is stepping forward to teach regenerative farming. And anybody that's grown in Florida knows it's the easiest place to grow anything ever. Basically, you plant it and it will grow. But for some reason, the schools have taught, from the chemical cartels, I'm sure is why, that you need to water all this stuff because they're using chemicals. That's why you have to water. So there's so many questions on Tropical Fruit Farm, and I'd love to go on there and answer them, but I try to do it here on my channel, and I just don't have time to go on there and piece together one question at a time. It's too complicated. Then people think I'm a know-it-all and blah, blah, blah. I'm not a know-it-all, but I do have experience dry farming all these rare tropical fruit trees, and I have a fairly good understanding of how it works. So because of that, I want to share it with people, because nobody else seems to be doing it. And it's really surprising to me that there isn't just overwhelming like demand and interest in how we are growing cacao here. It's never been done like this in Florida, and it obviously works, but you know, only 35% of my viewers come from the US on this channel, and probably 10% of them come from Florida. So there's very little interest here in Florida to grow this way, which is a shame, because we're gonna run out of water, they say, within 7 years of clean water, fresh drinking water. This is our yellow sapote, the canistel fruit. This is one called Delightful, and it's got some fruit on it. It's a grafted tree from Garden of Delight. It's quite a good fruit. It's one of my favorite fruits. You can't eat a lot of them, but so they say if you eat more than 2 of them that you get cursed by it and you won't be able to eat them again. But I've never I never have consumed them like I would a mango, which I have made myself sick on them, but I'm ready to eat them again the next year. No problem. I can eat like 15 mangoes. So I have one Trinitoro seedling cacao that I planted over here, and being around the house, and I have my rose there that's called crepuscule. It's a climbing rose. It's getting huge finally. I put the water on sometimes, not now. It hasn't rained here in a few weeks, and nothing appears like it's suffering yet. So until it looks like it's suffering, I don't water it. So this is kind of in a protected spot. This is the only one that's in a protected spot, and it's probably the only one that got any supplemental water. Being so close to the house, it got, extra water because I fill up my rain barrel when it's dry, and it overflows, and it's right here because that's what I use to water my aeroids in pots. And I like it to sit in there for a couple days before I use it when I have to use the well water, because the pH is different than the pH of the rainwater. And I only use rainwater generally, but when it's drought and I haven't been able to water, or when it hasn't rained, I water this stuff around here. I water this tree kale, tree collards, and I water the plants around the porch just because I like it to look robust and healthy. So that Trinitoro cacao is 3 years old, and I have some of its brothers that were started in the same time that I will show you shortly. I'm working my way over there, and they aren't nearly as big, but fast growth is not indicative of health in a plant if you've been giving it inputs. So the University of Florida says that cacao will be damaged under 60 degrees. Well, we get down to 31 degrees, and I've never had any cacao die from the cold, and it's due to the natural conditions that we grow in. They've shown that the biology in the soil is what protects the plant from abiotic stressors, so freeze and drought and salt stress, stuff like that. And when you're giving your plant salt-based fertilizers and fungicides and herbicides, it prevents the microbiology in the soil from forming relationships with the plant. My whole problem with modern agriculture is that they all look at it the same way, like row crops. And then there's like John Kemp, who looks at it as row crops, but then he uses biological inputs that have been identified, rather than looking at the whole system like the biodynamic people do. The biodynamic people look at the whole system as one unit. And that's what I do, and that's kind of an indigenous way of growing. Or not kind of, it is. So cacao has been grown successfully by indigenous people for thousands of years, and same with the achachairo in Bolivia. It's Bolivia, the state tree of Bolivia is the achachairo. And yet, I just seen where University of Florida totally disregarded any information that the Bolivian people would have on indigenous growing, and did their same old recommendations. Remove the plants from around this thing, water them, don't let them be below 60 degrees, give them fertilizers and the same amount of lychee, which is huge amounts of fertilizers. And we dry farm everything. We dry farm over 500 achachairo. We got achachairo to fruit within 4 years. Granted, it was a larger tree that was bought, but still, it was pretty quick. And I feel the biggest the biggest detriment to our system here was the compaction, because this was all mowed lawn. So all this stuff that I see here, the durian that I just planted, the durian that I planted like 2 months ago, the durian I planted just the other day, all look fine. They're not showing any signs of drought stress. The cacao seedlings planted with the coffee, planted next to another, that's a cacao. This is a Pulisan tree. So these are all Criollo cacaos, the little tiny Criollo cacaos in here that I just planted a few months ago. There's one there, there's one, that's a durian. There's one, a bunch here, there's one here, there's one here, there's one right there. And I have them all over. So the beauty of buying cacao is you can buy the pods from Montoso Garden for as cheap as like $15, I believe, and then pay shipping, of course. They're in Puerto Rico. That's where I get all of our cacao pods from, our cacao fruit. And that way you can experiment rather inexpensively, because you can get up to like 70 fruit from one pod sometimes. Not all of them have that, but it could be more or less than 70. But there's usually more than 40. And so, and they all germinate when you buy fresh cacao pods. Well, it appears that all of them germinate. I don't count the seeds anymore. So this is a little Plinia inflata that I planted here. And I just noticed it because, you know, we're going into a drought phase. And so the biological living orchard floor is starting to get thin. It's growing right next to a little citrus that I direct sowed there, the seeds. We have about 12 different types of citrus. I just did a thing on citrus, all seed grown. We grow all our citrus from seed. And I just ordered some bergamot citrus seeds, which is a cholesterol lowering fruit, which I didn't know. They say it's a cross between a citron and a wild orange. We grow citron here. They all grow great. And eventually this is going to be a major citrus producing of multiple different species. But this is a video about cacao. So the cacao, I sow directly in the ground like I did my durian. So I put the shovel in, I push it forward, I rinse the roots, I drop it in the water, and then I plant it. So I should probably get a shovel and show you just because. So I don't think anybody has ever dry farmed cacao in Florida. And we have about 50 trees that are successfully growing from the last 3 years. So I have fruited a seed-grown cacao from a tree that I dry farmed in Brevard County. That's when I figured out I could do it. That tree was kind of in a protected spot, but our trees out here are not in a protected spot. And the biology in the soil prevents them from freezing. So I like to get my little cacaos or my fruit trees that I start in pots. I try to start them all in terracotta, because they've shown that the plants started in plastic around the root zone have microplastics that prevent, they're hydrophobic, so they prevent water from being uptaken in trees that are started in plastic pots. So I get rid of that problem by getting my fruit trees that I purchase at nurseries that are grown in plastic pots and throwing the soil away and then rinsing the roots off. But I also do the same thing, rinsing them off in rainwater. But I also do the same thing with my own trees that I start in compost. So we make compost. It's the same thing as my daily manure that I apply. I wait for it to have tree roots growing in it. And look at this rose. I'm totally into antique roses. So this is another antique. It's a thornless one. I prefer the thornless antique tea nosettes and teas. They grow well and they fruit here or flower here year round. And I love that rose. That's actually a cutting I did that made it. But anyway, back to how I plant them. So I got to get no, I don't need a water bucket because I have rainwater barrel over there that I could put them in. So I take my little pots of plants and I get them when they're like 2 inches tall, because they're saying that root architecture, phenotypical root architecture, is important for the growth of the plant and the abiotic stress. So being able to prevent stress from cold and pests and diseases and heat and salt from affecting the plant. But when the tree is kept in a pot for too long, the architecture of the root doesn't grow correctly, so it gets deformed. I showed that in my durian video I just made 2 videos ago. So look at this fungi that grows in our soil. So this is all happening underground also. And it's been dry here. But because of the moisture in the air at night, on areas where there's not, because this is a mowed path, so there's spotty areas where there's no plants. So they try to cover the soil and capture the moisture directly from the air. Whereas they're in the root zone of the plant. If you have healthy plants and you haven't been using chemicals, then they're able to proliferate. And that's what we focused on here at Frog Valley Tropical Fruit Farm, is the fungi on the soil and looking at the whole system as one living organism, because that's what it is. So TFF, nobody ever discusses soil. Nobody ever talks about soil health. Nobody ever says soil is the problem. It's all one nutrient at a time, or one environmental factor like sunlight or shade. It's never a mutualistic approach to preventative plant health care. So here's another little Criollo cacao. And that's another problem I have with them. It's like they can't move beyond what is industrial farming. So they're always looking at they ask questions like, how can I grow cacao in Zone 9B in California? First of all, Zone 9B in California and Zone 9B in Florida are two completely different zones. I don't care what anybody says, they are. And there's just not the humidity there. And sure, you have a long dry period, but we also have had long dry periods here, several months, and never had a problem with our trees dying. And it's because we build up the soil and we leave the plants in the ground. And even if they die, we don't cover them all with mulch. I noticed the Hopi Indians, the indigenous 2,000-year-old American indigenous people of the U.S., in Arizona, and they dry farm corn and squash and melons and beans. And I do a lot of visuals. That's how I learn a lot of stuff. And that's why I do the videos, because I look at stuff, because I can see how things are being grown indigenously. And most of those places look like this. But in the dry, arid Arizona Valley, what would the people at TFF say? You need to put mulch down on the soil. Nobody looks at the indigenous people, what they're doing. They don't put mulch down in the Arizona desert floor. They look to see if plants are growing in the desert. And that's where they choose to plant plant their vegetable gardens. You have to be able to identify whether your plant can eat, whether your conditions in your soil can even grow a healthy tree or a healthy piece of corn. And if there's plants growing in there that are healthy, then it's going to be able to grow. So if this lawn grew out and it was like still really short, I know that it's because of compaction from being a lawn for 50 plus years, because that's what this was. And it took me a long time to figure that out. If I had known what I know now, back when I started this farm, things would have speeded along much quicker. But I had to do trial and error and figure it out on my own, because nobody was giving any information on regenerative farming. So I planted 40 bread nut seeds, a highly tropical articarpus, like it's basically the same as breadfruit, and that's one of them. They all seem to be coming up. They've never been watered. So all this stuff that you have to water stuff in Florida just simply is not true. It's all about soil health. Why this isn't being discussed on TFF is it's just weird to me. And when I did try to discuss it, they just kind of wouldn't listen, and they want to look at one thing at a time. So here's our fruiting cacao tree, and I really didn't start mass producing cacao until after I saw that this tree actually fruited, I guess it's going to be 3 seasons ago. So was the first time it gave me 4 fruit, basically 2 winters ago. I love the little anoles. Oh, hello, little green lizard. So look at all the fruit on this tree, and it's just covered. I think we're gonna have like 30 fruit from this tree, this little tiny tree, all without being watered. And of all the trees and all the different plants that I grow here, this is the species that amazes me the most. And it just really, what amazes me just as much is the fact that people are not interested in how this is being done in Florida. It's just very bizarre to me. And then people want to grow in like California cacao, but they fail to see that you cannot grow a cacao and fruit it if you leave it in a pot. It needs the biology from the soil to protect it against the abiotic stressors like freeze. And the only way to do that is to have it in the ground. Or if you're gonna have it in a pot, remove the bottom of the pot and set it on the ground. Cacao have a huge taproot. So I mean, look at all this cacao in there. Easily 30 fruit, probably more like 50. Probably all of them will not make it, because some will drop off during the drought, but I'm sure most of them will make it. So this is my little cacao that I have started in seeds that I got from Matosa Garden, and this is a Trinitoro cacao. And here's another Criollo cacao. And next to it I have my Lindero Garcinia right here. There was another one, but I see that the rabbits got it. You know, the rabbits will get your favorite plant. They got my favorite rose, climbing rose. So this is a cacao that I planted last year, and this is a Trinitoro. This is a yellow-ribbed cacao, I think. I don't mark them because I just figure when they fruit, I'll know what they are. But here's my other cacao. This is how they look. This was just one pod, and you can see I got easily 10 fruits in each pot. So this one still has some coming up. This one has a lot. So there's easily 40 fruit trees in there. And here's a little Keppel tree. So the Keppel tree is a tree that I always wanted to grow, but before I knew to remove the soil and rinse the roots in water, they always died. I kept trying, but until I figured out that you have to remove the soil and rinse the roots in order for them to be able to communicate with the biology in the soil to grow in a dry farmed way, or to be able to grow, period, successfully, didn't have success. But that tree obviously is doing well. It's been in the ground for quite a while. It hasn't been watered. And I'm going to go over here and show you how I do my fruit tree planting. Got to get my shovel. So many different, I need more than one hand. I need like 4 arms here, but I only have 2. But anyway, not to complain, no problem. So I have water in this little rain barrel that I've used to water my my aeroids that are in pots. And I'm gonna try to get this to come out without damaging the trees. There. So there you go. This is them. And then I'm gonna throw them all in water. And they get colonized by the fungi, which holds the soil to the roots. But I really don't want that on there. Once they've done their job, then the soil releases. It's not a permanent thing. I think I just damaged this one. I felt it tear. You really don't want to tear the roots of these little trees. So you have to be as gentle as possible, but it seems okay. So I put them in there, and I can leave them in there until after this video is made. And this is all our compost that I make. This is what it looks like, just my daily manure. To say that the daily manure isn't as good as compost just doesn't make sense to me, because the compost is the daily manure here, and certainly you're getting benefits from during the process of the compost, the small piles, the low piles of compost sitting on the ground, because all the biology is grabbing those nutrients and reducing the manure into assimilated soil. And so that's why I wait until it has plants growing in it. Very nice looking little trees. So I'm gonna get my shovel, and I just think it's so important to keep spreading the gospel on cacao, because cacao has been shown to have 40 times the antioxidants as blueberries. And all the information that I've read has shown that all the antioxidants and the bioactive compounds in cacao are a lot larger than any other superfood. So it is like the super fruit. And the cacao, I'll have references on this stuff that I'm talking about at the bottom of my description and on the YouTube page, channel. And they've shown that studies have shown in mice that mice that have been given chemotherapy through, the stuff they use for to stop cancer, to kill cancer, I guess is what it is, highly toxic to human tissue also. But they've shown that the Theobroma Cacao has compounds in it that alleviate that cytotoxic, cell-destroying compounds in the radiation. So there's so many benefits from cacao, and that's why I do these videos. So I was thinking this was a Plenia inflata, but I'm thinking it might be a Plenia, but not Plenia inflata. It's the other Plenia, the big one, the large Plenia that I can't think of the name of. I'm not totally into Plenias and Jaboticabas, but I have pretty much a little bit of everything here. And we are mostly focused on Sorry, I was going to go look at the Trinitoro cacao over there, but we're mostly focused on Garcinias, Achachiro in particular, which is what that was. So it's just shocked me to read the recommendations to set up a industrial Achachiro farm in Florida, and they said it can't really handle below 60 degrees. Well, that's totally news to me, and just like it's news to me that cacao cannot handle our environmental weather here. But because we recognize that soil health and the biology in the soil, particularly the mycorrhizal fungi, aids with the help of the other fungi, the arbuscular endophytic mycorrhizal and the saprophytic endophytic fungi that are like mostly known for consuming carbon, like dead plant material, but they also are mutualistic in plant hosts, and they work in unison with the mycorrhizal fungi. I did links of this on my videos in the past week. I'm mostly going to provide links for the cacao and the benefits from it, and the indigenous ways that it can be grown. And why aren't people looking at the indigenous forms of growing it just in Florida? And why do people want to grow cacao, but yet in areas that has historically not been able to grow cacao? So this is about as clean as I'm going to get this little cacao tree. Maybe a little cleaner. I like to rinse the roots fairly well, just so there's no buffers against biology in the soil that changes the pH in the rhizosphere, and the tree, when it gets put in the ground, is like at its most advantageous. So this was in a small pot, and the roots haven't really been obstructed by the pots, like you see when you move trees from pot to pot due to size. So people that want to grow cacao in these cold climates, I'm going to do a hole, and then I'm going to come back and get that, because I can't really carry them all without damaging it. So people want to grow cacao in these areas that are historically, they say you can't do it, in like zone 9B in California and zone 10A in California. I'm not really sure if you could grow it in California, but I'm sure anything is possible if you believe it and you focus on soil health. But these people, they leave them in the pots, and they think that if they move them from area to area while they're being kept in pots, that they're going to be okay and be able to survive until they plant it in a choice location. But just by leaving the plant in a pot, especially a plastic pot, is going to prevent your tree from ever being able to survive abiotic conditions, because it's not going to know how to communicate with the soil. And you have to build up the biology in the soil. You can't just expect the biology to be there. So I should have I'm going to tell you a way to create a drought-tolerant soil. So these are my a more drought-tolerant plant with biology, with the aid of Biodynamic Horn 500. So these are my Trinitoro cacao that are the same age as that one that I watered. This is one here. Got to be careful I don't step on anything through here. So this right here, this is not drought damage. That's from the wind. It's been very windy here. The new leaves are very young, but do not fear when you see stuff like that. Do not fear when the leaves start drying up during drought and they drop off, and the longer the winter goes on, the less leaves you're going to have on your cacao. I've shown this in the past. This is a cacao that I planted. So this is from 3 years ago, and this is from last year. And it's not really 3 years, but it's starting its third year. So 2 years. Here's another one right here. And there's a lot of them. I mean, we have like 50 cacao now going on. So I'm going to plant that seedling right here. So this is what I do. So pound the shovel into the soil. You could tell it's kind of compacted. And then I push it. And I leave one side undisturbed, but the other side where I want the tree to express its full architecture of its roots, I make a space big enough for those roots to sit in. And then I leave it like that. And I do it during winter and I do it during drought. I do not adhere to other people's rules of only planting during the rainy season or during warmth. I just don't feel it's necessary, and I've been doing it this way for several years, and it obviously works. I planted cacao during the worst drought we've ever had here during the winter, and just assumed that the trees possibly would die. There were gifts from my friend Tim in Port St. Lucie that grows regeneratively. He's a very knowledgeable grower, and he makes incredible compost. And every tree he's given me has survived. So those little trees that he gave me, I'll show them to you after I'm done here. Let me get this tree. Those trees that he gave me, I give it one last rinse. Rainwater. And then bring it over there. So those trees that he gave me, those cacao trees that I planted in the winter during the worst drought we've ever had, it was followed by a summer drought, a winter drought that was a summer drought followed by a winter drought. So I planted them in the second season of drought. So months of no water. Our pond dried up in the front up here. It's never done that before. And especially it dried up during the summer, which just blew my mind. So you know the water table was quite low. So I planted them and all of them survived. So I know that it can be done. And the cacao trees in indigenous like to be planted under overstory. So this is a big nitrogen fixing tree, a guanacaste tree, state tree of Costa Rica. And this is a native laurel oak tree. And it's quite large. And I capture biology with my BD 500 horn. So I said I would tell you how to make your plants more resilient, your soil more resilient with Biodynamic Horn 500. So you take clean, preferably zebu manure, because it is superior to cow manure. They've shown that. And I've got to make this a little deeper. So one side is totally not disturbed. So the roots and everything are just going to touch the roots of this when I put this in here. So it's going to instantly excrete carbohydrates, sugars, that is going to call biology, that's going to cause a swarm around this little cacao tree right here. So I put it in there. I do this. I try to gently put it in there so it just goes naturally and without much packing. And then I remove this side. So half of the soil is undisturbed, or as disturbed as little as possible. And then I gently pack it down, and then I finish doing it. And I don't water them. They've shown that if you water plants, that they're less likely to form mycorrhizal relationships with the mycorrhizal fungi in the soil. So their root zone isn't going to be colonized by the water-giving mycorrhizal fungi in the soil. So to make your soils more more drought tolerant, I did a lot of stuff. I chopped up roots from cacti. Nitrogen fixing cacti. There are a couple of species. I had one of them. I don't know the name of it. I chopped up the roots of that and put it in my bokashi compost, and then made compost from that. So it infused my composting area, though my bokashi compost was made in plastic pails, which is a source of microplastic pollution, which is a source of heavy metals and nanoparticles that contain biocides and other known carcinogens. So it wasn't the best thing. I've stopped doing that. But you can also take BD 500, buy the horn from the Josephine Porter Institute, Biodynamic Institute that sells biodynamic preps. There is no teaching of biodynamic farming. You have to read the Biodynamic Farm Standard and come up with your own farm plan by adhering to their biodynamic farm standards. They do not teach you how to make compost. I don't think people that are teaching how to make compost know how to make it correctly. It's just too highly disturbed. The least disturbed your compost is, I feel, is the better way to do it. And that's why we just drop small piles of what was our compost that we used to turn and just leave it and walk away. And when tree roots start growing in it, or plant roots, weed roots, start growing in it, I know it's ready. It's kind of a borrowed system from Indian zero-budget natural farming. Because Indian zero-budget natural farming, I can't think of the word, but they make a compost. It's the word's evading me. Sorry, Hindustan. But they make this compost that they chop up all this stuff and they make this looks like coffins, dirt coffins above the ground. So it's small, low piles, like the length of a coffin and the width of a coffin, and about 3 feet tall or 2 feet tall. And they do layers of, it's like a layered compost, but they chop up all this stuff. And then they let it sit there. And then at a certain point, they plant like a bunch of different seeds in it. And then when the seeds sprout, then they chop it up some more and then let it set. And then when that's done, then the compost is finished. It's kind of borrowed from that, but it's more of a natural form. That's kind of where I got the inspiration from it, with the tree roots growing in the compost that sits here. So this is a pile of compost that has been sitting here where the plant roots have grown in it. And it's really nice, but see how tiny it is and low, and it's basically totally assimilated to soil. And that's what it looks like. It's like the best thing ever. You want compost that has roots, chopped up roots in it. They provide important phytochemicals that are full of nutrients. So this is another cacao that I planted last year. I believe that's a yellow-ribbed cacao. This is a chachiro tree. The cacao, it's like, so this is one of the little cacao that my friend Tim gave me, and he bought one of those packages from Montosa Garden, which was a mixed variety, so Trinitoro, yellow-ribbed, and Criollo. I believe this is a Criollo cacao. I can tell by the long, thin point at the leaves, which I noticed the Criollo cacaos have. And this is one I planted during drought last year. So it's only been, I don't know, probably in, I think, January I planted it. Before the freeze, we didn't have a freeze last year, but it's growing right next to this jackfruit, which is growing right next to this citrus. And it's growing right next to a Lindero Garcinia. Trees do not compete with each other. That's a man-made thing from the modern agro system that they create, and then the studies, the controls they do. Here's a Trinitoro cacao. This is going to be a cacao farm. There's just no stopping it. It's going to be here. Here's another cacao. It can't die. It doesn't die from drought. It hasn't been killed. I don't do anything, so you know it's growing naturally and it's going to survive. Unless somebody buys this place and mows it all down. I did have somebody was interested in purchasing this place. But it hasn't moved. It's only been a couple days, but I am open to selling because I just don't feel I have what it takes to be to handle all the production of the fruit that this place is going to have within the next 20 years. So this is another one of those cacao from my friend Tim that he gave me. So anyway, the biodynamic horn, I never finished that. So the BD 500 if you take the BD 500 and you bury it, like you put the cow manure in the horn, and the fresh, holistically grown cow manure that you find, zebu manure in our case, which is superior to cow manure, they've shown that, and regular cow, Bo indicus is superior to Bo taurus cow manure. They're older cow. They've been raised holistically for thousands of years, so they haven't been ruined by modern American agriculture. I hate to say that, but that's how it is. Just have to look to UFL for the recommendations that totally ignore indigenous knowledge on how to grow this cacao or achachairo. And even in California, they totally ignore indigenous knowledge that's being done for 2,000 years. So back to the 500. So I take the BD 500 and I would bury it next to a overstory tree, at the base of an overstory tree. Or I would bury it in a cacti garden to capture the biology that's in the desert garden. So if in San Diego, you would bury it next to some coastal scrub that's super healthy, and then dig it up. I dig it up within 3 days. There's no reason why the biology can't colonize that manure within 3 days. Fungi move so fast, and it's such a rich nutrient that everything is going to swarm to it. So then dig it up out of your cactus garden, do it in multiple places, and then rebury it in your area where you plan to plant fruit trees, and plant your fruit trees right next to it. I have found that the more horn that I bury that have been colonized by indigenous microorganisms from around giant trees, plant it next to a nitrogen fixing tree, the better the soil becomes. Anyway, this is Eric, and this is Florida Natural Farming, and this is all about Theobroma Cacao. I am just going to keep talking about it until people get on board with natural farming and how easy it is to do in Florida, and how science is telling us that's what we need to do. We need to create biodiverse natural systems that we can put our fruit trees into to grow our crops. We don't need to destroy large swaths of land with forever chemicals that you get from sewer sludge, or you get forever chemicals from salt-based fertilizers, that's where they come from, or you get forever chemicals from plastics. We don't have to do that. There is another way. They've shown. I provide links in most of my videos now, so you can read up, you can do your own research, look beyond what they're telling you on TFF. I've never looked at TFF for information. Nothing against TFF, but it all seems like so trivial, and trying to piece it together one comment at a time is next to impossible. Whereas if you look to the wider research papers at the National Institute of Environmental Health or National Institute of Health, there's studies out there, or Science Direct or Frontiers, or most of the people that are doing regenerative studies are in foreign countries. I don't know of any in Florida. Nobody's ever reached out to me from Florida about looking at our farm, no scientists. Anyway, that's it. Have a beautiful day. This is Eric at Frog Valley Tropical Fruit Farm. This is Florida Natural Farming. Thank you.